We tend to think that massive systems, our governments, sprawling institutions, corporate networks, are built to learn. We naturally assume that the more data they gather, the smarter they get. But if you look closely at these massive institutions, you'll see something strange. As they expand, they actually start to actively purge new information. They begin making decisions that seem completely divorced from reality.
And this blindness, it isn't a glitch. As any massive system tries to scale up, it hits a fundamental constraint. You see, growth requires standardization. To process a massive volume of anything, a system has to establish uniform rules. It seems like a perfectly rational optimization, but it quietly kicks off a chain reaction that you cannot reverse.
Consider a simple mechanical sieve designed to sort physical objects. In the beginning, the mesh is loose, it's flexible, it can easily accommodate the unique, irregular contours of whatever material is passing through it. But as the required volume increases, that sieve has to operate much faster.
Now, think about the very edges of our institutions, the places where street-level bureaucrats, social workers, border guards, and police officers actually operate. Down there, reality is profoundly messy. The front line of any organization is entirely irregular.
Take a sprawling school district operating with tens of thousands of teachers. To process those kinds of massive, overwhelming caseloads, these edge nodes can't just flip open a rigid, theoretical manual. To simply survive the day, they have to rely on profound personal discretion to navigate the chaos.
So these frontline workers start navigating complex, highly individual cases using undocumented, experiential intuition. A social worker might bend a specific requirement for an unhoused applicant because they understand the immediate context. That intuition isn't written in any handbook. It's an unspoken rule, used purely to manage an unpredictable reality.
This unspoken survival mechanism is what we call tacit knowledge. It's a deeply subjective, context-specific kind of procedural knowledge that you only gain through personal experience. And because it lives entirely in the mind and the muscle memory of the worker, it's incredibly difficult to transfer up to the broader organization.
Going back to our physical sieve, that flexible mesh stretches and warps to process those unpredictable shapes. And it works. The irregular material is successfully processed. But the mechanism is slow, and it relies entirely on the tension of the individual wire.
Here's the problem. A growing system simply cannot tolerate localized independence. For the central organization to adapt, manage, and accelerate its overall volume, it must extract that local, individual experience and translate it into formal procedure. The system inherently demands explicit knowledge. It needs strict, universally applicable rules that are easy to communicate, document, and store. But in demanding this, the structure starts to actively reject the deeply contextual reality that just can't be quantified or put into a spreadsheet. So, the organizational structure forces an extraction cycle. It demands that workers document every micro-step to create perfect, repeatable code. The goal here is to standardize execution so perfectly that literally anyone can do it. Effectively, the system tries to erase the need for individual intuition entirely.
The mechanical sieve is recalibrated. That flexible mesh that used to adapt to irregular shapes, it's ripped out entirely. It's replaced with rigid, uniform squares, designed to only let perfectly shaped blocks pass through at incredibly high speeds.
Before we continue, if you are looking for a calmer way to stay informed, Sift is a news app linked in the description. It highlights only the most important news, completely avoiding the endless headlines and sensational content that clutters daily feeds. Returning to our structural failure. As the system enforces this strict uniformity, something disturbing happens. It begins to actively reject any frontline information that doesn't perfectly fit the new explicit rules. Nuance is no longer processed. It's automatically discarded. And this organizational blindness is heavily accelerated by technology. Software systems are introduced to rigidly enforce uniformity. Think about an online application form instantly auto-denying an incomplete submission. A human would have easily contextualized the missing information, but the software simply terminates the process. Discretion is cleanly and efficiently replaced by process. The frontline worker's fundamental ability to judge unique circumstances, their hard-won tacit knowledge, is structurally stripped away, all just to increase processing speed and eliminate variance.
This engineered elimination of human judgment has a formal designation. It's called curtailment theory.
It describes how technological advances and strict digital processes systematically eliminate the discretionary power of frontline workers, shifting control entirely to the centralized code.
Our mechanical sieve now violently bounces out anything that isn't a perfect square. The irregular shapes, the messy reality of actual citizens and unique problems just pile up. The machine creates a massive bottleneck of unprocessed reality simply because it refuses to recognize it.
At this point, the feedback loops sever completely, because the actual ground truth of those irregular shapes can no longer pass through the rigid squares. The central system completely stops learning from the edges of its own structure. It only sees what its strict parameters allow it to see.
Bereft of accurate, nuanced frontline data, the system has to rely on something else to make decisions. So, it defaults to the only remaining acceptable input within its rigid structure, the codified opinions of the highly paid experts sitting at the absolute top of the hierarchy.
Authority overrides direct observation. Employees are structurally forced to accept the highest paid person's opinion regardless of its accuracy to the real world. Why? Because the opposing, ground-level information has been fundamentally locked out of the data stream. This inevitable lock-in is known as authority bias. It's the tendency to attribute greater accuracy to the opinion of an authority figure regardless of the actual content. In a failing system, this isn't just human nature. It's a structural response, triggered when a network entirely isolates itself from contradictory facts.
Eventually, the structure hardens into total paralysis. The mechanical sieve is completely jammed with the messy reality it refuses to process. It's immobilized. Not by accident and not by malice, but by its own perfectly rational pursuit of scale, uniformity, and efficiency.
Escape becomes mathematically impossible. There are no villains making bad decisions here. There is no one to blame. The rational, local optimizations, the desire for efficiency, the implementation of software, the codification of rules, they simply compounded, step by step, until global failure became inescapable.
Ultimately, the organizational blindness and frustration you experience when dealing with these massive institutions is not a mistake. The next time you are rejected by a rigid bureaucracy, remember, the system was never failing, it was following its structure.